Denmark's Prime Minister Mette Frederiksen accused the US of exerting unacceptable pressure on the Greenland issue. And health authorities in Gaza reported that 792 Palestinians have been killed and 1,663 injured since Israel resumed its airstrikes. Hello, welcome to From the South. I'm Luis Alberto Matos from teleSUR Studios in Caracas, Venezuela. We'll begin with the news. Stay with us. During Grandparents of the Homeland Center inauguration, the President of Venezuela, Nicolás Maduro, reaffirmed his pledge to the Venezuelan people to repatriate the migrants detained in the United States. The head of state, Nicolás Maduro, pointed out during the event that they are already pursuing legal action against the Salvadoran government and that a habeas corpus appeal was filed demanding the release of the Venezuelan migrants who were kidnapped by the U.S. and held in concentration camps in El Salvador. For his part, the Venezuelan leader pointed out that the actions of the United States against Venezuelan migrants are a violation of their human rights and demanded respect for the same. In this regard, President Maduro pointed out that the bands of coyotes were controlled from the U.S. by leaders of the Venezuelan far right.
Y nuestro mensaje siempre ha sido, vamos a tener relaciones de respeto, de cooperación, de comunicación.
And our message has always been, we are going to have respectful relations, cooperation, communication. But there, they decided to attack the whole world.
Impuso un plan de agresión primero a los migrantes.
And the fascist extreme right here imposed the plan of aggression, first on the migrants, who are being persecuted, detained, disappearing. We have 238 missing migrants, kidnapped in the United States and delivered to a Nazi concentration camp in El Salvador. We are there doing all the legal actions. A group of lawyers brought in a resource from habeas corpus in front of the Court of Justice in El Salvador. In the United States, groups of migrants are doing legal actions, but they are being persecuted. Where they appear, they are captured, humiliated, kicked, kidnapped. I will continue to advocate, determined and persevering as I am, to rescue, kidnap and free all Venezuelans who are in prison in the United States and the boys in El Salvador.
Que están presos en los Estados Unidos y a los muchachos del Salvador.
The President of Venezuela demanded respect for Venezuelan migrants after the human rights violations of the United States government.
Porque están separando la familia.
Because they are separating the family, and they are giving us only men.
No, los separan.
No, they are separating them. They went to a city, got into the house, hit the boy, handcuffed him, hit his head in front of his two younger sons and his wife. They put a cricket on his wife, who is pregnant, and they won't let her leave her house. I demand from the U.S. government the respect for the human rights of Venezuelan migrants, who are noble and good people.
The Venezuelan President Nicolás Maduro said that the Coyotes gang are led by leaders of the Venezuelan far right and the United States.
Los coyotes, las bandas de coyotes desde Venezuela.
The Coyotes, the band of coyotes from Venezuela, was led by, in the United States, Carlos Vecchio, Carlos Paparoni. Write down the names.
Carlos Vecchio, Carlos Paparoni, Miguel Pizarro, David Smolanki.
Carlos Vecchio, Carlos Paparoni, Miguel Pizarro, David Smolanki, pure jewel of the fascist jeweler.
La Sayona María Machado desde aquí.
In addition, Leopoldo Lopez, Maria Machado from here, Julio Borges, among others, and then they coordinated everything. Now they had a lot of power in the United States. Because suddenly a boy, Pedro, from a neighborhood, sold his motorcycle, sold everything. He paid $5,000, and they took him from Petare to Darien, and in 5 weeks he was in New York.
Y en 5 semanas estaba en Nueva York.
In this context, thousands of citizens rallied through the streets of Caracas in support of the Venezuelan migrants taken under duress to El Salvador by Donald Trump's administration. Venezuelan authorities explained that the rallies are a response to those who want to mistreat Venezuelans in the world. Also, at the same time of this activity, in all the Bolivar squares of the country, the collection of signatures in support of their prompt release continued. We now have our first break coming up. Remember to join us on TikTok to stay updated on everything happening around the world. And we'll be right back after the break. Welcome back. In Bolivia, a new vaccination campaign was launched through the rapid monitoring system to detect infants and children who have not yet been immunized against a score of diseases. Our correspondent Freddy Morales has all the details.
Se inició el llamado monitoreo rápido.
The so-called rapid vaccination monitoring was initiated to reach almost 60,000 children under 5 years of age who, for whatever reason, did not receive their vaccination doses last year.
It is in the
urban areas where we are not achieving a higher coverage, but this is because of the high migration we have from urban to rural or vice versa. But generally in rural areas, all the families are well known by the health personnel. They know their name, their last name, how old they are, and they are more identified, but in urban areas it is more difficult.
El monitoreo rápido permitirá evaluar.
Rapid monitoring will make it possible to evaluate immunization coverage in the 9 departments, and almost 4,000 brigadistas will be deployed in this campaign.
Our coverage is in the 75% range. We aim to raise that to 85 to 95%. That's our goal.
La campaña consiste en verificar.
The campaign consists of checking, house by house, the status of children's vaccination records.
When we do a rapid vaccination monitoring, we go and look for children who might have escaped from that age group and who might be older. We would have to go and recover them, vaccinating these children, in order to avoid the risk of transmission of diseases such as measles, due to the epidemiological alerts that are issued at the international level.
Health professionals consider that the anti-vaccine campaign that manifested itself during the COVID pandemic has been overcome, which can be verified in daily consultations.
In this time, the COVID vaccines have been very important. Now I have had 7 patients who have passed COVID, but they are not in serious condition. They had to be taken to therapy as they were totally discomposed. Now it is like a cold, but they have to be treated. Vaccinations have lowered that level of lethality that COVID had.
Rapid vaccination monitoring is carried out in the country's 340 municipalities. The state provides the 12 doses to be applied between birth and 5 years of age, which prevent 20 diseases. Vaccinations are also offered free of charge for senior citizens and vulnerable groups against COVID and influenza.
Freddy Morales, teleSUR, Bolivia.
And in Paraguay, dozens of social movements took to the streets to protest against the anti-popular policies of the government of Santiago Peña. This is the first of 3 days of protests in the country. Let's see more in the following report.
Paraguay began a week of mobilizations to repudiate the deterioration of the quality of life, the anti-working class policies, and the corruption prevailing in the government of the conservative Colorado Party and the president of the country.
Here we have comrades who come from the health sector, demanding health, education, better employment, better wages, land for the peasants, for the indigenous people. All these problems lead us to the same path, which is corruption, because corruption affects the quality of life of our compatriots, especially of the most vulnerable sectors.
Almost 100 organizations carried out 70 protests in different parts of the country. According to the social leaders, the Peña government is a direct attack on the right to health and education, while at the same time, it is subject to multiple accusations of corruption.
Zero Hunger, that's the name of the project. My son goes to a public school where the canteen sells a plate of food for 12,000 guaranis. But the suppliers of the food program sell it for 25,000. Zero Hunger, but only for those who sell the food to the students.
Indigenous communities also join the mobilizations to demand historical demands, such as respect for their territories and the right to a healthy environment.
We come from Paso Yobai to claim our rights in relation to mining exploitation. We want to stop the contamination, and that is why we are taking to the streets and also accompanying the struggle of our peasant brothers and sisters.
We came to present our claims accompanied by our peasant comrades with the Eastern Indigenous Federation. We took the opportunity to make our claim for the land of our community.
The elimination of the minimum wage, the lack of medicines and intensive care units in hospitals, as well as the incidence of organized crime in institutions, are some of the factors that lead social and political organizations to continue protesting against what they consider to be a bad government.
Osvaldo Sayas, teleSUR, Asunción, Paraguay.
In other news, Denmark's Prime Minister Mette Frederiksen accused the U.S. of exerting unacceptable pressure on the Greenland issue. Frederiksen made her statement after it was announced that a U.S. delegation would visit the island this week. The visit will be composed of USA Vice President J.D. Vance, Second Lady of the U.S., and Michael Waltz, National Security Advisor, in addition to the Vice President, who was not initially expected to be part of the delegation. In this sense, Frederiksen has rejected that it is a private visit, pointing out that those attending are official representatives of another country. It's important to note that the Prime Minister has also said in another statement that the threats of the U.S. President about wanting to annex Greenland should be taken seriously. And in this context, the U.S. strategy to justify Vice President J.D. Vance's visit to Greenland without setting off diplomatic conflict has been to visit a U.S. military base on the island, after Vance suggested in an online video that global security was at stake. In this sense, analysts say that although the U.S. is allowed to visit the base, the visit is controversial.
Yes, the J.D. Vance is allowed to visit Biduvik Space Base. What is controversial here is all about the timing. Greenland and Denmark have stated very clearly that they don't want the US to visit right now when Greenland doesn't have a government in place. So it's all about timing. From Greenland's side, also from Denmark's side, it's more seen as an kind of intimidation. So it's an unpleasant surprise that we now see J.D. Vance also announcing his visit to Greenland.
We now have our second and final break coming up. Before we invite you, as always, to visit our Facebook page and find what we have over there. Stay tuned with us. We'll be right back. Welcome back. Health authorities in Gaza reported on Tuesday that 792 Palestinians have been killed and 1,663 injured since Israel resumed its airstrikes on March 18th. The latest 24 hours period saw 62 more lives lost and 296 wounded individuals rushed to hospitals across Gaza, bringing the total death toll to 50,144 and the number of injured to 113,704 since the conflict began in early October 2023. The Israeli Defense Forces confirmed that its ground operations are ravaging multiple locations across Gaza, with the forces having advanced into the Netzarim corridor in the central Gaza Strip, occupying about half of it. The occupation forces claim that over 150 members of Palestinian resistance groups have been killed since military operations resumed. And Israeli Defense Minister Israel Katz announced on Tuesday that he had approved the operational plan for the forces Gaza division to continue its military assault on Gaza. The decision follows a meeting with senior military officials and comes amidst reports that Israel is planning a comprehensive strategy to crush Palestinians and occupy the Gaza Strip. The reported plan involved deploying multiple combat divisions to reinvade Gaza, seize control of large areas, and forcibly confine the 2.2 million Palestinian population into a restricted humanitarian zone along the Mediterranean coast. The Israeli army would then assume control over Gaza, dictating the distribution of humanitarian aid and even calculating the caloric intake for Palestinians. And moving on, a severe HIV crisis is unfolding in Ethiopia's Tigray region following a devastating 2-year conflict. Once a model for HIV prevention with a prevalence rate of 1.4%, Tigray now faces a more than double rate of 3%. The situation is particularly dire among displaced populations where the prevalence is 5.5% and survivors of sexual violence who experience rates as high as 8.6%. The war has ravaged Tigray's healthcare system, leaving only 17% of health facilities operational and severely limiting access to antiretroviral therapy and other essential services. The crisis has been exacerbated by U.S. aid cuts under the Trump administration, which have resulted in the dismissal of 5,000 healthcare workers and the cessation of vital support services for HIV patients. Kilauea, Hawaii's most active volcano, resumed its sporadic eruption on Tuesday, marking the 15th episode of its ongoing eruption cycle that began on December 23, 2024. The eruption restarted at midday when molten rock began flowing from a vent in Kilauea's summit within Hawaii's Volcanoes National Park. The lava remained confined within the caldera, posing no threat to nearby residential areas. Each time Kilauea erupts, it produces spectacular fountains of lava that can reach heights of up to 220 meters, creating a dramatic display for visitors to the park. The previous episodes have varied in duration, with the shortest lasting 13 hours and the longest extending for 8 days. The intervals between episodes have ranged from 24 hours to 12 days. And in China, several subway stations have become exhibition halls for cultural elements in order to bring culture closer to the country's inhabitants. Let's see.
A total of 13 subway stations across China incorporate novel designs and cultural exhibits through traditional elements and objects, offering a unique charm to commuters who pass through these places every day. The various exhibits at the stops combine local heritage with contemporary decorations, from murals painted on the platforms to pillars adorned with square lanterns and shadow theater figures, alluding to the traditional practice of the Lantern Festival. One of the cities favored with this art is Xi'an, in the northeast of the country, where the stations show the coexistence between traditional culture and modern technology. Another of the main features of this station is that it also has an installation of lights that can change color, highlighting the modern and technological atmosphere in the place. Other areas with cultural exhibits are located in Beijing, where traditional Chinese elements were placed and the ceiling was decorated with more than 1,000 lanterns, each one adorned with brightly colored flowers symbolizing good wishes. In addition, one corridor is decorated with a large mural inspired by the famous Ming Dynasty, painting entitled Image of the Shangyuan Lantern.
The design of Hanyao Station was conceived with the idea that it would not just be a subway station, but a subway space that combines culture and technology, serving as a calling card of the city. When passengers enter the station, they can experience both the ancient charm of Xi'an and its technological advances.
Like these, many other cities in China also offer a variety of cultural displays to passengers and visitors, such as Chengdu and the Jinsha Site Museum, where a history of approximately 3,000 years of the ancient Shu civilization is on display. All these actions aim to bring Chinese culture closer to all the country's inhabitants as they go about their daily work.
Like this, we have come to the end of this news brief. You can find these and many other stories on our website at telesurenglish.net. Also join us on social media, Facebook, X, Instagram, Telegram, and TikTok. For TeleSUR English, I'm Luis Alberto Matos. Thank you for watching.